This is ODAT Chat, your instant connection to recovery and community, one day at a time. This podcast may contain strong language, sexual content, and spiritual truth. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to ODAT Chat. My name is Arlena, and I'll be your host. In case you didn't know, ODAT stands for One Day at a Time. If you haven't yet, don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you don't miss out on upcoming episodes. I have a bunch of really interesting ones coming up, so you don't want to miss those. And you might be wondering about the purpose of the podcast, and what I can tell you is that besides wanting to clear up a lot of misconceptions about addiction and recovery, I also wanted to share the teachers, ideas, and exercises that have helped me on my own journey over the last 22 years that really fall outside the perimeters of a 12-step group. And in my intros, I usually review a book or another resource. And today I'd like to share a meditation app called Headspace. So if you're struggling with meditation or if you're a beginner, a guided meditation can be a good place to start. And the whole point of meditation is to really calm the mind and help you gain clarity of thinking. So I know from my own experience that when I practice meditation regularly, my day flows better. I'm not as reactionary or as impulsive. I've been using it for just over a year now, and I just want to highly recommend it. So Headspace. The guy has a cool accent. I think you'll like it. You can actually find a link to it on my website at odatchat.com. So in this episode, I'll be talking with Kevin, and Kevin is one of those guys who is always in service, like always. In our fellowship, he has earned the nickname of the Mayor of ODAT. So he has a talent for fostering connection and building community. Kevin shares his story of addiction, how he got sober, and how his family and his life has really healed and actually flourished in recovery, among many other topics. So he's such a wonderful person, and I'm so grateful we're friends, and I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. So with that, please enjoy this episode with Kevin. So Kevin, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast this morning.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So I thought what we'd do is start out by talking a little bit about your background so that the people listening can kind of get an idea of who you are. Okay. So how old are you?
I'm 45 years old.
Have you always lived in this area? Did you grow up here?
I was born in Daly City near San Francisco and moved here to the Campbell area when I was about 2 with my mom.
Okay, just your mom?
Yes, my folks divorced right around that time when I was 2. So.
Oh, which is why your mom probably moved.
Right.
And is your father a part of your life?
He is. He's in recovery as well. He's got just celebrated, I think, 12 years.
I did not know that.
Yes, and we don't see each other as often as we'd like. I mean, our life is real busy with the 3 children, and We're trying to work on that. We're trying to spend more time together, but it's difficult to find time. So
yeah. Where does he live?
He lives in Millbrae.
He lives in Millbrae. Okay, so it's kind of a jaunt from San Jose. Okay, so you mentioned 3 kids. What are their ages?
Maddie, our oldest, is 20. Grace is 16, and my son Josh is 11.
11. Okay, and you're married. How long have you been married?
We've been married. So Maddie's 20. We've been married 20 years.
Funny how the
details.
Wait a minute. It's very scandalous.
She likes
already.
to joke that she was the love child. So.
She really was.
She's good-natured about it.
She's good-natured about it.
She was able to attend our wedding. She was 6 months when we got married.
Oh, that's so funny. And it, like today, nobody cares.
No,
like
it was,
this day and age, nobody cares about that stuff. But even 20 years ago, maybe a little eyebrow was raised here and there. But these days, nobody cares.
No.
Nobody cares. And so let's see. How long have you been sober then?
My sobriety date is 1/2/12, so I just celebrated 5 years in January.
That is the coolest sobriety
Is
day I think I've ever seen. Yeah, 5 years. That feels like a big milestone.
It was, yeah. It's exciting. I mean, we know it's one day at a time, but 5 years. I could have never imagined 5 years when I first came in. I mean, just even one day was an accomplishment. So, yeah, looking back over 5 years and everything that's happened in those 5 years is pretty amazing. So.
Yeah, that is amazing, and we'll definitely get into it. And what do you do professionally?
I am a commercial real estate appraiser.
Okay, and you've been doing that for a long time?
Yeah, let's see, probably the last 18 years.
Oh, that is a long
Yeah,
time.
a couple different companies, but
Okay,
Yeah.
you've been doing that a long time.
Yeah.
Okay, that's pretty cool. And let's see, what was your drug of choice? Alcohol, obviously, but
it started with alcohol and weed, as a teenager, and then later on in my disease, I progressed into cocaine,
okay.
and that. I'm Mr. Gratitude. Like people say, Kevin, you're Mr. Gratitude. And I almost look at like my cocaine use, being grateful for it today, because in my mind, I could have gone on for years as an alcoholic, like
Right.
a functional alcoholic.
Right.
And cocaine brought me to my knees so quickly and into recovery that I'm almost grateful that it, got me
Yeah,
here as
got
soon
you
as
here
it did.
sooner,
Yeah, because
yeah.
with alcohol, I was an alcoholic at the core, and I could have functioned in that capacity for years to come, probably. So.
Right, yeah. So, yeah, my husband has the same thing. He got sober at 18 because of cocaine.
Right.
Yeah, back in the 80s, it was a thing. I don't know that it's as big a thing these days.
It was for me.
But, yeah.
I think I was bringing it back.
Oh, that's right, 5 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, not only did it speed up my metabolism of my body, but it sped up my entry into recovery, which I'm really grateful for.
It sped up every day.
Exactly.
Yeah, an accelerator.
That's right.
Yeah, so awesome. Okay, and tell me a little bit about your family of origin. Do you have siblings? Or?
Let's see. So, like I stated earlier, my mom and dad divorced when I was 2. Mm-hmm. My mom remarried. My dad remarried. On my dad's side, I have a stepsister and a half-sister, Angie and Vicky. When my mom remarried, I had a stepbrother and stepsister from that marriage. Mm-hmm. My mom divorced another time and is now remarried, and I have an adopted sister with that marriage. So
They adopted?
yes,
a child?
a daughter from Romania. She was 3 years old, I think, when she came here, and she's 27 now, something.
Oh,
so.
she's young.
Yeah, very.
So that's interesting.
Yeah.
So your mother was not able, or just didn't have another child?
I think she was at the age where, it wasn't. They didn't want to be going through the whole infant type stuff. So
Right.
3 years old was a good age for them. And a funny story with that is, so her and I are we'd be 18 years apart. Mm-hmm. And I remember one time I was asked to come to her kindergarten class, and it was bring your sibling to school day. And at kindergarten age, your siblings are either infants or 7 or 9 years old. And here I come from work with a tie on, and I'm sitting in circle time, crisscross applesauce. And, I didn't care at the time, but it was kind of funny because we're so far apart in age.
Yeah, you're like a grown-ass man walking in.
Whose dad is that?
You're like, wow, you're kind of young to be having a child.
Right.
You're like, no, that's my sister.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's funny. She must have loved having a
She
big
did,
brother.
yeah.
Well, she was an only child?
She was, yeah. She had me, but I was out of the house with my own family. So her and Maddie are only a few years apart,
7
but they are
years.
aunt and niece.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like 19 kids and counting,
Exactly.
you know. Like,
She's not 20. She's younger. I'm sorry. She must be 22 because her and Maddie are super close in age.
oh, okay, so she's only a couple years older.
Than Maddie. Yeah.
Okay.
So they're like aunt and niece,
Aunt
but only
and
2 years
niece, 2
apart.
years apart. Yeah,
so-
big families, that
Right?
happens. Yeah.
Exactly.
Or your situation,
Right.
whatever.
Well, like you said, having Maddie at an early age and before we had been married is not a big deal now. Now not the type of family, the family of origin. Like I have stepsisters, I have adopted sisters, half sisters. It's just we're
No
a real
brothers?
mix.
Did you say no
I
brothers?
had a stepbrother for a while while my mom was
stepbrother.
married the second time, and then she divorced and we kind of lost touch after
Yeah,
that. But
yeah, that happens.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay, and so I think what's so interesting about recovery stories is there's typically, and I'll have you give 5 or 10 minutes
Sure.
of your, like your story, your chair, whatever. But it's interesting, as I've been doing these interviews, the reoccurring theme is there's typically some sort of like original harms, like in childhood. Usually something happens in childhood, and there's a lack of ability to cope. And then when we discover drugs and alcohol, that becomes our coping mechanism. So was that true for you?
Yeah, as you were speaking, I was thinking about that, and I am under the belief that I was born an alcoholic and addict. Mm-hmm. And I do remember as a child, when there were like father-son events and my dad wasn't around, that being very difficult.
Absent father.
As I mentioned, my dad's in recovery 12 years now, but there were times I remember as a child where he would be scheduled to pick me up for the weekend and wouldn't show.
Oh.
And knowing what I know now about recovery and our disease, it was most likely due to not being able to show.
Sure.
So again, in my disease, self-pity and poor me, woe is me, led to drugs and alcohol. But my parents' divorce, I'm sure, had a factor in that.
Sure.
But it would have been something else. I mean, I am an alcoholic and addict at the core, so even if that hadn't happened, I still would have found something to feel sorry for myself about.
Yeah. A friend of mine told me when I became a new parent, and I'm sure you've experienced this too, it's like you're so worried about your kids that you don't want to do to them what was done to you.
Right.
Right? You want to protect your kid.
Yeah.
And it puts such pressure on us. And a friend of mine told me, she's like, Arlena, nobody escapes childhood without some issues.
Right.
And so that was sort of a relief, but it does, like you say, if you are an alcoholic from the gate and you do have the isms or the predisposition,
right,
then you will. It doesn't matter how.
Well, I remember doing my steps to it, what you're referring to with the children, and one of my biggest fears when I got to the fear column was that harm would come to my children.
Yeah.
And then, as I got further into my steps in the program and working with my sponsor, I realized the biggest fear of something happening to them was myself. Like I was going to harm them drinking and driving with them in the car, or just not being responsible because I was, loaded on drugs and alcohol. So what I really feared was more myself, harming my children and
protecting. Wow, that's such a burden because I know that you really, listen, I know the kid, your child-centered family. So that must have just been so difficult for you.
Yeah.
How old were you when you started drinking?
Gosh, I think I was, 13, 14 years old. And it was funny, I just shared at a meeting recently. I chaired a meeting, and it was interesting because I was a big Little League player. I was 13 or 14, and in, I think we called it Majors Division or something like that. And my first drinks were actually shotgunning beers in the dugout of the Little League field that I played at. And
are you serious?
yeah, and it was... the alcohol, having alcohol at 14, it was kind of exciting, like it's taboo, you shouldn't do it. But then I was also hanging out with some older guys, and for me, that was the feeling of, belonging or, that we kind of longed for. So the alcohol was one thing, but also the feeling of being part of was
connecting.
Kind of cool. Yeah.
Yeah, feeling connected. It's funny how we connect through alcohol.
Right.
Yeah. Interesting. So you start drinking young, and then did you have any consequences early on, or
not? If looking back on it now, my grades were not stellar going through school. I'm sure I could have done a lot better. In high school, as I was drinking, I was also very involved in sports. I was on the basketball team at Lee High School, and I remember one particular incident at school where I was goofing off in class, and I got thrown out of the classroom. And as I was sitting out on a bench out in front of the class, the dean walked by, and I still had a healthy fear of authority, and I thought, oh my gosh, I'm really going to be in trouble. And he came up to me and he said, are we going to beat Westmont tonight? And that was his main concern. So I think kind of being a student athlete, like I got away with more than...
A little more.
Yeah.
That's really common. Yeah, we have a professional athlete in our orbit that talked about how he got away with doing some really bad things because he was a really good athlete.
Yeah, and then again, my mom, being a single mom at the time, I had a lot of free time to kind of evolve my disease without her knowing. And
we grew up in the latchkey kid area. I don't think they even call it that anymore.
Right.
But we would get ourselves to school. Elementary level age to get
third or fourth grade.
Like get yourself to school, get home, you have a key to the house, you come in. My mom would say, call me when you get home, lock all the doors, don't light any fires.
Right.
But all that time alone being unsupervised.
And then again, the poor me, woe is me, my mom's not around, where friends, moms were home baking cookies when they got home from school and, coming home to an empty house. It was,
it was lonely.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, loneliness is a terrible thing for an alcoholic. So your drinking progresses.
Correct. But, in the big book, they talk about the actor and the chameleon of, I could maintain, being a fairly decent son. I was respectful to my mom. I got decent grades. I wasn't, a scholar by any means. I was able to stay in sports and able to function because my disease hadn't really progressed to the point where I was, not functioning well. So, 14, 15, through my high school career. Again, at 14, I didn't really have great access to alcohol, so my drinking was really contained to the weekends, going to parties, and, Friday through Sunday was kind of my thing. But, indicative of my disease and the type of alcoholic I am, my thinking was, well, I'm not going to be able to drink again until next weekend. So I would go Friday to Sunday really hard because I knew it would be a while until I could again. So.
You had to get it in, get it in where you fit in, right?
And that followed me, I mean, throughout my drinking and using career. I mean, as I was married, it wasn't kosher to be drinking a lot during the week and not meeting my responsibilities. But, Friday night after work, it would be guys' night or something like that. And I would always go, over and above because I knew it would be probably another week till I got out. So
then it was
overdo it.
If it's worth doing, it's worth overdoing.
Exactly. That's right.
Yeah. And so how old were you when you met Celeste, your wife?
Gosh, I was in my early 20s, 23, 24, something like that.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah.
And we progressed fairly quickly, and we were married. Oh, we got pregnant with Maddie first, and then we were married shortly after. So, and one of the things, I mean, I shared recently, and this came up, was that, she drank the way that I like to drink. That's one of the things that first attracted me to her. We were pretty regulars at Boswell's, and we would drink together. And
were you really?
Yeah, that was our spot.
Dude, we probably drank there together. Listen, I crashed and burned early, but 21 through 25, I was at Boswell's.
Right.
Frank Joseph, remember?
Yeah, who's the one-man band? With
the one-man band, and my childhood friend, Lorianne, was a cocktail waitress there. They called her Lulu. She was this cute little blonde thing. She worked there for years. You must have...
I'm sure.
known her too, right?
I don't remember a lot of the times in that period, but I know I was there.
Yeah, that's funny how we don't remember those things.
Right.
Funny, not surprising, right? And then, okay, so you begin to, what kind of consequences are you experiencing in your relationship that lead you to?
I think in the beginning, from talking to Celeste about this, she felt like she saw something good in me, and she knew that I drank and that I smoked. She didn't know about the cocaine use, which comes later in our relationship and becomes a huge issue. But I think initially she saw a good person. We worked at Hope Rehabilitation together. We worked with developmentally disabled adults. Aww. So she knew I had a good heart, and she thought I could change him,
I'll fix him.
Yeah, I'll fix him. And that wasn't the case. I mean, eventually she did, but it took a lot of going through hell.
Did she fix you, or did you fix you?
Yeah, she kicked me out of the house. I look at that as the initial start of me fixing myself. Yeah, that was the catalyst.
She's like, get your shit together.
Exactly.
That is so funny. And it's so funny because she is so sweet. And it's so funny how, listen, she and I are, I'm older than she is, but we're, in this sort of same age group where we're wild and we look the part. And then as you get older and you become a mom, it's like suddenly you develop this soccer mom facade and people think that you were always this sweet and innocent, right? I remember one time when I was, when Tyler was a baby, we had a guy coming over to help us with stuff around the house, and I had a daycare in my house, and he was the painter was telling me the story, and we became friendly, and he dropped an F-bomb or something, and he was he realized what he said. He gasped and was held up his hands. He was like, "Oh my God, I am so sorry." And I was I looked behind me and I was like, "Who's he talking to?"
He doesn't know you.
It's that was the first time I realized that other people's perception of me was not my perception of me.
Yeah.
I was like, "Oh, you have no idea who you're talking to." That is hilarious.
Yeah. Well, that came up the other night when I shared the person that I am today 5 years after being in recovery. When I told my story, people came up and they're like, "I know you today. I can't imagine that same guy." It's amazing.
Yeah, the book talks about the Jekyll and Hyde. Once we start putting stuff in our body, we can't predict who's going to come out.
Exactly.
Yeah, I told you about my two alter egos, the Wimpy Wendy and the Badass Betsy.
That's funny.
Yeah, so I was definitely the Jekyll and Hyde, and it sounds like you did too. Yeah, it's tough to wrestle with that identity because I'm sure, and I don't mean to put words in your mouth and you tell me your experience, but didn't you have those moments where you'd wake up the next day and just be like, who was that guy? Or why did I do that?
Yeah. Or I mean, even not even waking up the next day, but as I'm in the disease and the things that I'm thinking and that I'm doing, I think part of why it bothers us so much is because we're not being our true person, who we are on the inside, and it's conflicting with who we really are.
Right.
And it really ate me up. And I remember coming into the rooms and, half-assing it, not really doing the steps, going out, ending up in rehab. And I think part of that was what is he, head full of AA, belly full of booze. Like I knew what were the right things to do, but I wasn't doing them, and I felt very conflicted. And that actually kept me drinking and using for a while until I decided to, give recovery 100% or 110%. So.
Yeah, definitely the half measures. Yeah.
It was funny. Half measures. It's funny when you say that, because one time I met with my sponsor, and I don't know why this resonated with me, but all the games I was running to stay loaded, he knew about them because we talk about it. And he said, Kev, if you put 50% of the effort into staying sober that you do into getting loaded, this is going to be easy for you. Because I really had a lot of... games I was running as far as money and hiding and all that stuff. And he said, it's 1 hour a day for a meeting, work with a new guy, read the book. I mean, it's a much easier, softer way. So.
Isn't it funny how we're so obsessive about everything except recovery? I've been talking about this a lot, but it's like the two things. I keep thinking if I could just get addicted to exercise and work, that my life would be fabulous.
Yeah, exactly.
or even the program.
Yeah.
But we typically don't do anything in half measures except for... But listen, it makes sense, right? Because the whole purpose for drinking and using is to distract ourselves from our feelings.
Right.
So tell me about tell me what it was like for you. Like what happened that made you get sober? Was there an event? Or?
Well, it was, years coming. I mean, Celeste, I could tell, wasn't happy with my drinking. And again, she didn't know about the using at the time. She's a normie. I mean, she drank but never used any drugs, not a single drug. So when I would come home with the saucer eyes and talking and sweating and all that, I would say it's my allergies or I'm not feeling well. And she believed that, and that's part of the trust that it took to rebuild in our relationship, because she didn't trust me anymore. I had lied about so many things. So what happened was, I remember it was sometime in 2011, I think New Year's Eve, actually, 2011. And I stopped by a friend's house. I said, I'm just going to go have one drink, which as an alcoholic addict, we never just have one drink. But I told her that. And once again, and this had happened 1,000 times, I called an hour later and said, I think I made something up, like my buddy's having a hard time, I need to stay for a little while longer. And sure enough, before long, I had missed dinner with the family on New Year's Eve, which, we were all looking forward to. I got so spun out from doing drugs and drinking that I literally passed out in his apartment. And, being no fun, he moved on to another apartment where some other friends were. And
you mean you were no fun, so he left you?
Yeah, I was out. I was, spun out. And Celeste called him knowing that I was at his house, and because he was in another apartment, when she called and said, is Kevin there? He said no, and she hung up the phone really quick. He came running back upstairs to his apartment and said, I think I just threw you under the bus. Your wife called and I said you weren't here. So I panicked. I called her back right away. I said, I'm over at Paul's. I'm at Paul's. And she was convinced 150% that I was cheating on her. And to put her mind at ease, I confessed to being an alcoholic and drug addict at that time. So she wasn't happy about that answer either, but it was
the lesser evil.
The lesser of the two evils. So
that she could forgive.
Yeah. So that was really kind of the beginning of the end. At that point, I didn't really know about recovery, but she said, you need to go see your doctor and figure this thing out. And fortunately for me, through my company, I'd been with them for maybe 10 years at that point. I signed up with the insurance when I first started there. And my primary care physician is Dr. C.
Oh, my goodness.
So I'd been seeing him for the flu, my ankle hurts, whatever. And I never put together who he was. And but he knew who I was, I'm sure. It just wasn't his place to say.
Right.
So I went and saw him, and I confessed to him that I had a problem with cocaine and alcohol. And he gave me a big hug, and he said, you made my day. Thank you so much. I love you, and there's nothing you can do about it. Those are a couple of his catchphrases. And
he wrote me people to the room.
Yeah, he wrote me a prescription for a meeting at Alano East, a Saturday morning men's meeting.
A prescription?
Yeah,
like
on the prescription bed. Yeah.
This is your prescription.
And that was my very first meeting. I went to that one, and it was funny. Lavelle was actually chairing.
Oh,
So I think it was the first time I met him.
A dear friend.
Yeah, it was not what I expected of AA. There was a lot of crosstalk and guys yelling from the back of the room.
Really?
Yeah, just inappropriate.
Unusual.
Lavelle. Yeah, it was unusual. So I wasn't really... you
weren't feeling it?
No, I wasn't feeling it. But fortunately for me, Maddie, our oldest daughter, was in high school at that time, and one of her best friends...
Wow, she was already in high school.
The dad had about 20 years at the time, and I knew that, so I kind of confided in him, and he told me about the ODAT meeting, which was at Lee and Hamilton at the time. So I tried that, and that was much more what I was thinking AA would be like, and I felt, more at home there. So
yeah, I don't feel like the movies really portray it very well most of the time. Right. It's so funny that we do come in with sort of an expectation of what it's going to be like.
Right. Yeah. And I think I had a fear looking back on it now. I had a fear that I knew this would work, and I wasn't sure I was done. So, I was coming in and again, not really doing the work and checking it out, and I would go out and come back and not re-announce. And that eventually ate me up on the inside because I knew what I was supposed to be doing, and I was hiding secrets and lying. And I ended up eventually in rehab because I just couldn't. The pressures of trying to maintain my recovery early on, a marriage, 3 kids, a job, a mortgage, bill collectors. My cocaine use put us into a huge amount of debt. We were getting phone calls multiple times a day, credit card companies, and it was, the wheels had come off. I mean, if you talk about your life, alcohol, my life had become unmanageable, and that was so clear for me to see. So I was not really willing to admit that I was powerless over alcohol, but I could see the unmanageability in my life, and I needed to go. I kind of knew a little bit about rehab from being in the rooms, and I even talked to some people, and they said it's essentially $11,000 big book. You could stay here and get the same thing, but I needed to check out. I needed to soul search for like 30 days just to figure out, when I first checked into the rehab, one of my first thoughts was maybe I don't want to be a husband and a father and an employee. Yeah. Maybe I want to be this party, good time guy. And within a couple of days of, drying out, I realized that was just total insanity. That's not who I am. So again, the switch flipped. You talked about it earlier, where we're so obsessive about stuff. And I kind of, I guess higher power came to me and said, if you're willing to put that much into your drinking and using, if you shift that to your recovery, you're going to get this. So something switched in my head at that point, and I went so hard into recovery as I did into my drinking and using. And again, I'm at 5 years today, and it's been really good.
Yeah, and I'm curious because you bring up that your higher power, and I know that you're involved with the church and you do a lot of service work.
Right.
You've taken my son with you. My son's required to do service work through school. They go to a Christian school, but and I know service is a big part of your life. But tell me a little bit about like what your concept of a higher power is, and how did that work for you? Like, so you showed up at the room.
Yeah, and I did the first. I think I even did a 5th step before I went to rehab.
Really?
But maybe didn't reveal everything. And I'm not saying that's what took me out. It was my lack of effort in my own recovery.
You were just not ready?
Yeah. Well, and I would talk to my sponsor about that. I would say, I keep relapsing. And he goes, Kev, you don't have enough substantial time. You're just not done yet. You're not relapsing. You're just not done yet. So, as far as the higher power, it was interesting. So I did the first, 5, 6 steps with him. Then when I got to rehab, when I look back on it now, I almost went 3, 2, 1 up there because I was done. I said, God, take over. Like, I am done. I am done with this. Either I'm going to die, suicide or, overdose, or I'm going to let God take over. And then when things started to get better, step 2, I came to believe. So it's kind of going 3, 2. And then after that, I was willing to admit that I was powerless over alcohol and drugs, and my life was unmanageable. So I kind of did 3, 2, 1 in rehab, and then when I got out, I went through the steps in order again with my sponsor. But up there, I remember just like sitting on the bed and detoxing. I can't do this anymore. Take over, and and then again, once things started to get better, is when I came to believe. I wasn't even sure I believed, but I said, "Here, try it." I mean, it's not working my way.
Yeah, my way's not working.
And then I started to come to believe because things were getting better, from doing the work and doing what I needed to do.
Yeah.
And things have been better ever since. So.
Did you have a concept of God before you got?
I did. Our family, I was raised Catholic, but we were more Easter and Christmas Catholics. We didn't go very regularly to church. And even, in our family, my immediate family with my wife and my 3 kids, we went, probably 2 weeks out of the month. And I was so wrapped up in the disease that I wasn't getting messages. I was just going because I thought I was supposed to go. And, developing my own concept of a higher power has really helped me come back to the church and sit and absorb. Kind of like, I guess with a lot of our program is like you take what works for you and then, discard the stuff that doesn't work so well for you. And that's kind of how my church life is now. And you mentioned the service. I really love being of service. I mean, it's one thing to sit and listen to the pastor speak and get the message, but like the message to me is helping other people. So it's good to, not only sit in church, but get out and actually practice what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, so. And you do a lot of service. I feel like you're always sort of at the center of a lot of, you really spend a lot of time nurturing your tribe.
Right.
Inviting people and helping people feel included. And
I think that's, a lot of it's the lineage of my sponsorship. I mean, that's what I was shown when I came in. Isolation is a big part of our disease, and my sponsor would invite me to the birthday parties and the dinners and that kind of stuff. And again, doing things my way, I wouldn't have gone, but now I needed to try to do things differently. So I would show up to that kind of stuff. And I saw what a loving and compassionate man he was, and I wanted to, he had what I wanted, and I wanted to kind of convey that for myself going forward.
So that's how you picked your sponsor, is he had what you wanted?
Yeah.
And what did he have exactly?
Again, the love and compassion. I mean, the patience he had with me. I mean, as I was trying to get this thing, he never scolded or anything like that. He loved me until I could love myself. And starting to love myself, I was able to love other people. I had always loved or told my family I loved them, but I don't know if I ever truly felt the love until I got into recovery. And it's just amazing. His compassion and love is something that I wanted to emulate, not only with my own family, but with people that I work with and anybody in the rooms.
Anybody out there, really, because you do a lot of homeless, you feed people and stuff like that.
Well, a lot of a big part of my program, I guess, too, is the yets. Like, even besides almost losing my family, I didn't have any real legal consequences. The financial stuff we got taken care of, but I'm always a big believer of the yets. I hadn't been arrested yet, but I could see it was right around the corner. I didn't lose my family yet, but it was right around the corner. So the homelessness, I could have been me. I mean, if I'd been kicked out and I continued down the path I was on, there's a pretty good chance I would have been homeless at some point. So.
Yeah, and you touch on the family afterward, because tell me about this. The way you talk about your daughter and the relationship. I know that going through rehab was really tough on your relationship with her. But can you just sort of tell me the story about like what your experience was with her?
Yeah. So Maddie and I, we were always very close. She was our first child, so I read to her kindergarten class. I coached her softball teams, and we just had a really great relationship. And then, it's funny, working with my sponsor, I came to realize that this is pretty normal. But as she became a teenager, there became a distance between us, and you're weird now, Dad, and don't talk to me.
You're embarrassing.
And I thought, again, an alcoholic addict, I internalized it, and it really hit me hard. And I don't want to say she's why I drink and use, but I didn't have any coping skills, so I would drink and use to get rid of those feelings of not being good enough for her or whatever. And then again, working with my sponsor, he says, well, how old was she at that time? I said, 13, 14. He goes, dude, that's a teenage girl. That's what they. I said, well, nobody ever told me that. So to deal with those emotions, I drank and used a lot, and
it must have been so heartbreaking for you.
Yeah, it was tough.
Because it sounds like you guys were so connected.
We were, yeah.
And then she started to separate.
Right.
And it must have been so heart-wrenching.
Yeah, and then again, looking back on the disease, it's like, it makes no sense to me that you're having problems with your daughter, so drink and do cocaine. That'll make, it made me feel better, but it definitely wasn't going to fix anything. And I see that today, but I did not at the time. So, eventually, the disease, it had gotten so bad that I remember Celeste calling me at work, and she could tell on the phone that something wasn't right, just slurring words or not answering correctly. And she knew I was loaded. And she said, come home right away or we're done. So I drove home from work. I work in downtown San Jose. It took me like 15 minutes. And I remember Josh running down the driveway and jumping in my arms, and Celeste grabbing him out of my arms and saying, get the F out of here, we're done. She took one look at me and knew
you were loaded.
Knew I was loaded. So I got kicked out, stayed at my mom's for a couple of weeks. We agreed that I would go to rehab But because of our insurance, I had to wait for the year to roll because we have like a $5,000 family deductible. So we would have paid that twice in December and then when January rolled. So we decided to wait till the first of the year.
Yeah, rehab is expensive.
So I checked in on January 1st, 2012. So my sobriety date's 1212.
Okay.
And the two younger kids, we told them I was at daddy camp or daddy's going to become better dads, which is true. I mean, somewhat.
For sure.
And then Maddie knew about rehab. And she actually asked Celeste, is it just alcohol or is dad doing other stuff? And without talking to me, which is fine now. I look back on it. Everything happened the way it was supposed to. Celeste went ahead and told her, like, dad's got a cocaine problem too. And in her mind, like an alcoholic was a little bit more acceptable to her because it's a legal deal. Right, a lot of people are alcoholics, but the drug addict part really threw her off. And, she wouldn't speak to me the whole time I was up there. I would write her letters every day, just about every day. And I'd talk to Celeste on the payphone and I'd say, is Maddie getting the letters? And she would say, well, she gets them, but she rips them up without even reading them. Aww. And that was, I was already upset about what had happened, and that was just heartbreaking. So, I talked to my sponsor about that stuff, and he would come up and visit me. It was only, I think, immediate family that was able to come to the rehab, but he knew somebody there, and he said he was my Uncle Ken, so he was able to come, and he brought my Aunt Bethany. So they came, they prayed with our family one time. I'll always remember that.
Yeah.
And one thing that he told me was, Kev, you need to stop saying you're sorry because you've said sorry 1,000 times and you're sorry doesn't mean shit to anyone anymore.
Right. Yeah. It's not about saying sorry. It's about
the
behavior.
Show them that you're sorry. So I did that. When I checked out of rehab, I went back to ODAT as my home group. And I remember that first day thinking, I'm at 31 days. I don't really need to re-announce. And then I'm like, well, if you're going to be working an honest program, you should try to start by being honest here. And I got up. Yeah, I got up, and before I even could say 30 days, 31, I just said, I'm Kevin, I'm an alcoholic. And I remember a lot of clapping and hugs. And I didn't even have to say 30, 31, whatever. And I was kind of, back in the fold, working with my sponsor. And I was staying in SLE for the first month, so trying to work on the family afterwards was a little bit difficult living somewhere else, but I did the best I could. I would get up every morning at 5 at the SLE. I would get showered and ready for work, go to ODAT, and after ODAT I would run home and still help the kids get ready for school and pack lunches and that kind of stuff, go to work full-time, hit meetings, sometimes at noon, sometimes after work, and then just go back and sleep at the SLE. I did that for about a month, and Celeste started to see enough of a change in me that she asked me to come back home, which was great, and I thought, now I can really work on the family afterwards. But in all honesty, it was probably 2 years before I really started to change as a person, like the behaviors and that kind of stuff. I remember trying to hold on for so long to the not drinking and using, kind of white knuckling, doing my steps, working with my sponsor, but my focus was so much about not drinking and using that I wasn't really changing as a person. And my 2-year birthday, we were out to lunch with my sponsor, my mom, my stepdad, and Celeste, and my wife, and we had a nice time at lunch, but I looked at Celeste and I could see that something was just not right. She just didn't seem right. So walked her out to the car after lunch and she started crying. And I thought, well, maybe she's super proud of me. Like, I'm 2 years sober now. So I said, hun, what's wrong? Why are you crying? And I was expecting the answer of, I'm just so proud of you.
Yeah.
And she looked at me and she said, I'm really happy you're not drinking and using anymore, but you're still an asshole a lot of the time. And you're not very helpful around here and that kind of stuff. And that's when, from that point on, 2 years to now, is when I really started focusing more on becoming a better person, becoming a gentleman, as Bob would say. And she's seen, in the last couple of years, I've heard her say, I'm proud of you, I love you, great job working with that guy. I mean, she's really embraced me and this program. And our life is really good today. I mean, super blessed. Maddie, the one who wouldn't speak to me, she's now at college at the University of Oregon. And this past weekend, I just got to go up for Dad's Weekend, they call it. So it was a father-daughter type weekend. And, she texted me, the weeks before. And, I'm really excited for you to come. And we just had a wonderful time. I went up there with zero expectations because the kind of alcoholic addict I am. I'm expecting everything to go this way.
Okay.
And if it doesn't, I get butt hurt and I ruin the whole rest of the weekend. So I just went up there. I said, whatever happens, just enjoy being with her.
You stayed open.
Yeah, and there were a lot of events that actually involved drinking. There was like father-daughter beer pong and that kind of stuff. So Maddie would say,
What?
Dad, I didn't sign us up for that one. I said, Maddie, it's fine. I said, you know what? I came up here to spend time with you.
Yeah.
Whatever we do is fine. And
Yeah.
and that, I mean, that is a miracle of the program. This is a girl who, 5 years ago wasn't speaking to me, had lost all respect for me. And today we're probably closer than we've ever been, which is just awesome.
Oh, it's a beautiful thing to see. And I know that when you had your 5-year celebration that I saw the picture. I wasn't able to attend, but I saw these pictures and heard the stories of, didn't she speak?
She made a great speech just about how proud she was. Better grab this tissue. About how proud she was of me. And, she brought her boyfriend. And it was a great night. It was a lot of I'm sorry you didn't make it, but there was a lot of the people who've been instrumental in my recovery.
Yeah.
And then I guess kind of in keeping with what you had said about being of service all the time, somebody had reached out to me that I've known from high school and was trying to get back in the program. And it was the night of my dinner. And I said, why don't you come to this dinner? It's going to be, a few people. It ended up being like 70 people.
And 100 people showed up.
She came, met her sponsor, I think, that night, and has been sober ever since. So it's just a miracle. And it's, again, like what my sponsor taught me, invite people places, shake hands, make people feel welcome. And so it was funny. It was interesting, too, for my 5-year. I was like, well, 5 years, I should be more humble, like not make a big deal about my party. And Celeste, my wife, was like, no, we have to do this. And she took over and planned the whole thing.
She sure did.
She made a speech at dinner and, thanked everyone for being there. And, it was just a great night.
Yeah, you guys are such a great family. It's so good to see that when you do the work, you get the results, right?
Yeah.
And you guys are so out there. And I love how you always invite everybody. So in the rooms, you're sort of known as the mayor. Which is funny because... So Saturday mornings has turned into a big breakfast. Like we are literally taking over that entire restaurant now. And I remember, so Bob and I used to go there every Saturday with Mark. And we did that for years. I think we invited you one time.
Right. Yeah. Like, hey, I like this place. I think I'll come.
I think I'm going to invite all our friends. So now, what would you say? There's probably a good 50, 60 people every Saturday.
And I don't remember it being this particular weekend, but I think it was my 4-year birthday. And we went there afterwards. It happened to be on a Saturday.
Yeah.
And then it kind of evolved. Lisa and I together have kind of grown that. And it's been a neat thing, too, for newcomers to see that meetings, sponsorship, steps are super important, but fellowshipping and being involved with people is also really important for our recovery. So.
It's interesting because isolation is what we're sort of drawn to do, but we need to connect. That really is, sort of the foundation of recovery is connection and then learning to love and accept ourselves, right? Because the whole reason for isolation is that we just can't bear to be around other people. It's like we can't stand ourselves or other people.
And that's probably the drinking and using is when we're by ourselves and we can't stand to be with ourselves.
I know, right? Yeah. It stops working.
And the breakfasts and the parties and that kind of stuff are great too. I was just thinking about, there could be people who, don't get called on at the meeting and need to say something or don't feel comfortable saying it in front of the whole group. But at breakfast, you can pull somebody aside or you're sitting across the table from them and you can, share what you needed to share. So
yeah, absolutely. There are times when, you go to the meeting and it's early and we're insane. We get there at 6 a.m.
Right.
Well, you do the coffee before.
That's another thing that's kind of grown too.
I know, which is nice. Super fun.
I was thinking about that the other day too. Our middle daughter, Grace, she's taking a class in high school that starts at 7 a.m. every day. So I can't stay the whole time at ODAT. So I usually leave between 6:15 and 6:20. And I was thinking about the coffee thing, and I think part of that evolved because I need that connection, that fellowship. And because I have to leave early, getting there at 5 and talking with people. And if I've got anything going on, being able to share it, at that time is a good thing. So.
Yeah, what's interesting is that everybody wants to be included, and you've been so good about like Saturdays, so that we have trained the restaurant staff on how to take pictures of our entire group. It's so
Isn't that funny? They actually come to us and they go, "Oh, do you want to do the picture now?"
I know, we've totally trained them. We've taught. They say you teach people how to treat you.
Right.
We have taught their whole wait staff.
That's true.
How to treat us. And God bless them for taking separate checks and for
getting the food out really quick.
Jeez, I love these people. But just the social media aspect is kind of interesting because we do take and I didn't even ask you in the beginning, are you anonymous about your recovery professionally?
I don't talk about it real openly with everybody in my industry. When I did go to rehab, I had to confide in my immediate supervisor, and then that got bumped to our kind of managing director who directs our region. And on social media, I'm fairly open. I never mentioned the particular fellowship we're involved with because I look at that as being completely anonymous. I use the term recovery because I think it's very broad and general. I never name anybody else or, talk about any. I don't want to break anyone else's anonymity.
No last names, but we are taking pictures and posting them on Facebook, which has people's last names.
Right.
So there is this, and I wrestle with this all the time doing a recovery podcast because the whole point for me is I wanted to be able to clear misconceptions and speak about it openly.
Sure.
Sort of clear the misconceptions, but I realize and acknowledge that I'm walking a tightrope between breaking traditions. We don't use last names, but I have been using people's pictures because a lot of people are open about it.
Right, and again, when I post, I would never say this is an AA group or we're AA this or AA that. I say we're a group of people who are good friends and that kind of stuff. And at that point, a question gets asked to somebody in a photograph, they can tell the person I am or I'm not, or we're just a group of friends. That happened at breakfast. I ran into some folks I knew from high school at breakfast 2 or 3 weeks ago. And they said, hey, what's this group? What? I said, we're just a group of friends having breakfast. I mean, it's simple as that. And that's the truth. That's not lying.
Yeah, I mean, there's an appropriate time and place for everything.
Correct.
I think most people, especially in this day and age, there's not quite the shame associated. I think back in the day, the anonymity was so important because it would impact people fiscally, like you couldn't get gainful employment, and that's just not the case today. No. In a way, recovery is so mainstream. 12 steps are so mainstream that people understand that it's not a reason not to hire you for a job. Sure.
And one thing that I never really understood until I worked with my sponsor on this, but the anonymity is protecting our program as well. The validity of our fellowship goes out the door if Kevin's screaming from the mountaintop, I'm a member of this fellowship, da-da-da-da-da, and then somebody sees me drinking at a bar. Well, that fellowship doesn't work. Kevin look how active he was, and now he's drinking again. So part of it, I think, is protecting our fellowship as well, the anonymity.
Yeah, and I've heard that too, but it's almost like, does that mean that we are expected to be perfect afterwards? Right. It's like, I know religious people get a bad rap because they're just like, oh, look what that guy did. They claim to be religious and then they behave badly. Sure. There seems to be like no forgiveness for human frailties. Right. So
I constantly have to remind myself of that. I try to live a spiritual program and practice the principles in all our affairs, but I'm also a human being. Yeah. And human beings have bad days and make mistakes. So, I want to be really hard on myself. I've been sober for 5 years. I shouldn't be yelling at my children. Yeah. Well, I'm also human and I make mistakes. But the difference is with the steps and working a program, we can make amends for that stuff right away and clean it up and hopefully move forward and learn from it.
Yeah. And I realize, we talk a lot about attraction, not promotion, but I feel like there is a time and a place for clarifying misconceptions, which is really something I'm trying to do. But I wrestle with the whole anonymity and how to be careful. Right. I do want to protect the organization that saved my life. Correct. But I also want to clear, like I said, the misconceptions. So, it's like an evolving process for me.
Well, what's interesting is I mentioned earlier in our discussion about the gal who came to my birthday dinner. Right. And she reached out to me because she said, I've seen all your breakfast photos and I want that. I want to be involved. Yeah, I want to be involved. And how do people know that if they don't see you, living a spiritual life and fellowshipping with people and having friendships and growing? So
absolutely. And I think we teach our kids we teach by example to our kids whether we like it or not. Sure. And I was just discussing with somebody else, with Mike on the last podcast, how, we are only human. I think it's so funny that we reread this thing in the book that says we are not saints.
Right.
I'm thinking, I don't think anyone's really confused about
Right.
that.
That never occurred to me. Yeah.
I know, I get mixed up with Mother Teresa all
Right.
the time. No.
Well, Damon gave me the name Father Teresa, so.
That's right. I love that. Father Teresa.
Yeah.
That is so
I've been
good.
called a lot worse.
Yeah, but it's this idea that my kids are growing up. Your kids are growing, especially our little one too, because you got sober when he was little. So it's this idea that we bring our kids up and they're watching us, right? And so we do make mistakes and we do have situations that come up with our friends. Either we get our feelings hurt or we behave badly and hurt somebody else's feelings. Typically, I usually, if there is, that's a spiritual axiom. The book talks about that when we're upset, we're also at fault. Right. So, but what our kids are witnessing is that, and we're pretty open about things that are going on in our lives, that our kids see how we handle it. They see that there's a problem. I made a mistake, or I was selfish and self-seeking, or somebody else was, and it hurt my feelings. I was inconvenienced. How am I going to respond to that?
Right.
And how am I going to move forward? So they can see me, even if I behave badly, they can see that I can cope with that, take responsibility for what's mine, let go of what's not, and I don't have to guillotine all my friendships.
Exactly.
Because that was kind of my MO.
Right.
If you hurt my feelings, we were done forever. I'd guillotine you.
Well, our
so
children,
fast.
and then, my wife too, she's not in our program or our fellowship, but I've seen her she'll say amends, or she said, I think I'm getting a resentment over things. And that's not terms that we use prior to me, entering into recovery. So it's been fun to watch her grow as a person.
Absolutely.
From being involved or around our fellowship. And then the children as well. Like, Josh is only 11, and I've heard him use the word amends, and he's come to meetings and he knows what it's all about. And
he does.
It's fun.
Yeah, he's so cool. I like that he's so open and willing to, he's so friendly too. Like a lot of kids are super shy, like his age, they're shy and they don't want to talk to you and stuff, but he's totally willing to have a conversation, which is super cool.
Right.
As an old person.
And then Gracie, I think like you were saying, fortunately I'm in recovery now, and our children do model our behavior and how we do things. And she's super involved with Envision now. She's been going every week
for
the homeless shelter, the lunch on Sundays.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so she's been coming with me for the last month or so, but every weekend. And she saw me doing that. Now she's doing that versus, Dad's drinking. Maybe I'll model that behavior. She's seeing the good stuff. So and she's modeling that. We went, maybe it was 3 weeks ago. And there is Envision is the main shelter on Julian Street. And then every week they always took a tray of food to the women and children shelter. And I never thought much of it. I go, okay, there's women and children. And, Grace, her curiosity, she says, well, what's the women and children shelter? And Bill, who runs the program over there, says, well, that's, a separate shelter for women and children. Grace says, well, can I go with you? Well, sure. So now she's doing the serving over at the Women and Children Shelter just about every week. So
wow, that's amazing.
So it's nice. I mean, they do model, as much as they could model our bad behaviors, they do model our good behaviors and the good things that we do too. So
absolutely, we need to see what the options are.
Right.
Yeah. And I wanted to backtrack just a little bit because we were talking earlier about honoring our journeys. That it does talk in the book about no matter how far down the scale we have gone, that we can use that experience, turn the defects into assets,
Yeah.
And what were your thoughts? What brought that up for you?
I guess the shame and guilt that I felt about, the way I conducted myself with my family and the things that I did and the sneakiness and the lying and all that. And now being in recovery, how those bad character defects or the bad things that I did, by sharing those with a newcomer or a responsee, can literally save somebody's life. I mean, it could be the thing that makes them relate to you or keeps them in the program, or it's just the things that I thought were so awful about my life. By now sharing them with other people, I can potentially help somebody, and I don't know, that makes me feel better about myself. I'm not proud of the acts that I did, but I am happy today that because I've had those experiences that I can help other people. You
are uniquely qualified to help other people.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny, it's interesting because just recently I had a friend that he was having outside issues with, he was in our fellowship but having outside issues, and that occurred to me that I'm an alcoholic and an addict. If you have a problem with drinking or doing drugs, I can help you with that. But the stuff you're talking about, I'm not a marriage and family counselor. I'm not a psychologist. You need to probably talk to somebody who's more, our focus should be on what we know. And for me, that's drinking and using and recovering from that.
Yeah, and it's interesting because although we do focus on drugs and alcohol, it's just a symptom of a deeper problem, right? And I'm so grateful that we have the steps, because it was really the first time that I had an actual process for digging that stuff up and sorting it all out and then resolving it.
Yeah, and how I don't know, refreshing or different it was for me, the stuff that I had carried around inside for years. I mean, 40 years.
Yeah.
When I finally had the courage to share that with the sponsor, to not have him get up from the table and run away or say, don't ever call me again. Like to say,
you're an asshole, I'm leaving.
It's okay, that stuff happens. You know, it's what you're going to do now that's the difference. And it was really refreshing. And I try to be the same way with my sponsees. And
Well, we get to the root of the why we are behaving badly.
Right.
Why are we doing these things? I mean, I was at a meeting this morning where this lady was talking about, somebody asked her, why are you doing this? She's like, I don't even know. She doesn't know. Like, a lot of times we don't know why we do these things. It's like we're so disconnected from our feelings that it does take a little while. And you mentioned having like this 2-year period of, wrestling with this, and for whatever reason, that's a reoccurring number. It takes took me 2 years to sort of wrestle.
So I'm not unique?
Oh, I'm so sorry. You are absolutely
thank you.
unique. Yeah, your combo of crazy is absolutely.
Oh, good. Thank you.
And we do kind of find a new normal, right? We find a group of people who get our kind of crazy, so that we can, and what's interesting is, along the lines of honoring your journey, my sponsor is always challenging me to love my unlovable parts, and as we work with others and do service, we see that people behave badly, and we still continue to love them, whether their character defect is, one of the 7 deadly sins or whatever. It's like we grow to love them, and I almost feel like as we do that for them, we make it okay for ourselves too to continue loving ourselves.
Well, when you and I talked earlier too, I mentioned that quote about you can't hate the journey that got you here. Like all the bad things, we wouldn't be where we are today with recovery and spiritual life had we not gone through those things. So
absolutely. People talk about being grateful for being an alcoholic, and I totally understand what that means.
It took me a while to get that concept, but
it does sound kind of crazy, but once you're in this life, I've absolutely fallen in love with it, and I see that you have too. So we're kind of coming up on our time, and typically the way we wrap up is to talk about, it's the name of the podcast is ODAT Chat, right? ODAT stands for One Day at a Time, and that's how we stay sober. And I like to ask people, what is your daily or weekly routine? What do you do to take care of your sobriety?
Well, it starts with the 6 a.m. meeting, the ODAT meeting. Well, actually, earlier, 5 o'clock for coffee, like fellowshipping with people from, our fellowship.
Connecting. Yeah.
And then going to that meeting, and again, I have to leave early, which...
Yeah.
Steve and Big Steve's a big advocate of, we don't get sober to not be around our family. So I get the balance of, being able to attend the meeting for at least 15 or 20 minutes and hearing the chair, fellowshipping with people. And then I get to go home. I used to think of, taking my kids to school as I have to or a chore. Today I get to do those things.
Yeah.
So, I go home and I take Grace to school, get my family off. Usually do some reading either out of the Big Book or the 12 and 12 during the day. Pretty active prayer life. Meditation I'm not great at, but I pray every day. And then work with the newcomers, work with my sponsees. That keeps me in the book and helps me remember what it was like to be at that phase of my recovery, where they are. The old Kevin, at 5 years would have said, I've got so much time now, I can kind of cut back on meetings or ease back. But I know the kind of alcoholic and addict I am, and I drank and used every day, so I need to be in my recovery every day, and that starts with going to meetings. So I'm still in meetings 6 or 7 days a week, sometimes multiples. When I get asked to chair, I'll still go to the 6 a.m. And then chair a meeting in the evening. So I just try to work a good program, live a spiritual life, one day at a time.
Yeah, do the best you can.
That's right.
I have to tell you, I am so grateful to be in your orbit. You know, you really nurture.
I feel like I'm in your orbit.
Well, whatever. But I am so grateful to be a part of your community because you really do, you and your wife and your family are such a great example of, the gifts of the program. It really is magical, and it brings me such happiness and comfort to know that you guys are always there.
Oh, thank you.
And you've been so good to my son, helping him fulfill his service commitments, and know it or not, you're a big part of our lives.
Oh, thank you.
And I just want to encourage you to keep doing what you're doing,
Thank
because
you.
whether you know it or not, Kevin, you're helping so many people.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I don't mean to be all beauty pageant, but we are really creating world peace.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you as well, because Celeste and I, it was tough when I first got sober, and we see a couple like you and Bob, and you invite us to your home, and we see how you guys operate, and you're a good role model for a lot of people as well. So thank you.
Thank you so much for saying that. Well, listen, I love you dearly.
Thank you. Love you too.
For coming today.
Of course.
And we're done. Yay! Good job.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to ODAT Chat. Please visit odatchat.com for more episodes, to leave feedback or suggest topics and guests. Until next time.